feeling of the essence inside us, the inner core. I'm not getting off too well here, honey.
Okay.
Really?
You're doing
Okay.
fine. The oneness,
Yeah.
just let it be
Well,
one.
okay. Well, we have always been, and we are now, and we will always be perfect beings. We're all immortal beings experiencing a physical reality. We're hanging on to the physical reality because of our thoughts. We've actually become beings of thought instead of feeling, which we have as well, but that seems to be the minor, not the major. Thoughts have been the major. And when we think too much, we create too much. And we create confusion from feeling. Our heartfelt feelings are sometimes caught in the mist or the fog because we're thinking about one thing and feeling another. And
We're using our intellect instead of our heart feeling. And that's so important to come from the heart space and not from the head space.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. Keep going.
Well, it's been such we've been so programmed and so just brainwashed by the society. Our parents have been, their parents. It's been eons now that we've been so brainwashed and so submersed in all of the negativity and all of the ideas that we can't do things, that we aren't these masters, these spiritual beings that we truly are, that we were created to be. And the oneness with all of us here and all of the people that have been talking, saying the same kind of thing, but now is really, this is the ascension time. And it's time for us to realize, to really realize the oneness that we are involved in right now.
And it's to slow down until we can stop thinking too much and start feeling again. Everything in feeling is in the silent area, and it happens quite naturally and is 1,000 times faster than thought. Your feelings are always there. They're your inner self, your sub-areas that we feel. And it's very, very important to realize that in the experiences that we've had as humans, there has never been anything wrong. There is no wrong. We have thought there's wrong because we think it's wrong. But when we get down to it, in the essence of the ethers, experiences are just what they are. They're just experiences. We tag them. We put the names, the adjectives on the experience, and we call it good, bad, right, or wrong. Actually, we have to now, in our collective consciousness, all of us get back to the feelings that we've had as being what?
No, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Geez, I don't seem to be going anywhere here, honey. I need some more help. She usually gets my motor started, and it'll start in a minute, but
I've never seen him act like this before, but I think it's so
different.
important. It's such an important feeling that we do need to come from that heart space and the oneness and realize that all of us are part of that oneness. And just like Shambhala having us dance and feel, but even in the quiet, still, small self of us, that oneness is where we need to be with God, with our inner selves. And Ralph has had such a traumatic, a special life, and I think that he's not wanting to share it right now, but he has been so touched by his beginning, in which I've always felt that God gave him this gift to work with Otis Carr, that worked with Tesla, and to create the spaceship that we're all looking and seeing now. We're seeing all of these different spaceships, the aliens or the Venetians or the Palladians. Everybody's coming into this oneness now, and there's no separation. And there's no separation with the animals and with the rocks and the trees. Everything is part of this oneness. And I believe that that's my story. And I know that you need to open up with yours.
Okay,
That's
well,
what people are here for.
that did it. She's got me opening up now. Okay, it goes back to when there's a long history, and for the most part, to shorten, because we've only got a limited amount of time, you can find a lot of this information on our website, which is Blue Star Enterprise, bluestarenterprise.com. You'll find a lot of information there. Or type in on YouTube Ralph and Marcia Ring, or Ralph Ring, or Marcia Ring,
Not Marcia.
and you'll find, what?
He said not Marcia Ring. It doesn't pull up anything.
Oh, it does. Well, okay. Actually, Marcia's been my best friend most all of my life. Well, the last 30, 38, 39, almost 40 years, she's been my best friend.
Thank you. It's okay.
And we've gone through the trials and errors just like everybody else, but we've tried to find the simple ways of doing things, because I, as you know, or some of you know, was raised in the woods. In the first, the minor years of my life, I communed with nature, walking back and forth to school, 7 miles round trip in Paradise, where we live now, same place, back and forth to school. And I became very well acquainted with natural law, the way nature does things. It's quite simple. There's no details necessary. You either do it or you don't. There's no middle ground of maybe or sometimes or I should or I shouldn't. They're obsolete in nature. You just are who you are, and your feelings will tell you to do it or not to do it. So for those of you that don't know, I work for a research and development laboratory in Costa Mesa, California, called Advanced Kinetics. And while working there, I was working with magnetics, and they were trying to force electrons through a magnetic field, just a big conical magnet, without deflection. They said my job was to get the electrons through the field and just keep trying until I get it done. Well, I worked there for, I don't know, several months, and the pay was good, but the job was boring, because I realized what they were telling me to do was to force the laws of nature, and you don't force things with nature. You adapt to and you work with nature. That's the only way you're going to ever get anything done. So when I was going through the woods, I learned to talk to, we call them doodle bugs. They're little bugs that live in the sand. And my sister and I used to bring them to the surface and talk to them, because we wanted to find out more about who they were and what they did. And they were called doodle bugs. And the way you brought them up was sound waves. We'd go doodle, 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 and pretty soon they'd start coming up from the sand. And they'd stand around us wondering what's up, you know? Well, we found that you can communicate with everything. I mean, everything has its own range, its own frequencies, its own vibratory rates. And it's not trying to interpret or to assume or to analyze how to do it. The way to communicate with all things is to just be still and wait for them, the dogs, the cats, the rocks, the birds, to give you the signals, and you'll feel them. Don't try to think them through like, well, it's the bird's chirping this, I'll chirp back. It doesn't work that way. You'll feel it first, and then you'll hit a resonance, and you'll start communicating with them. Well, the reason I brought that up was back to the laboratory that I worked at in the magnetic field. I went home and decided to show them the simple way of what they were trying to do complicatedly. I took apart an old television set, in those days I had a cathode ray, that's what shoots the electrons to the screen. And I took the television apart and set up the experiment that I was doing at the laboratory, which was running about $40,000 to $50,000 a day. That's what the cost of the experiments were. Because I had an oscilloscope, I had a giant Polaroid camera that took pictures as I fired the electrons. But I went home and took this television apart, put the speakers down, got it ready, and then I fired the electrons through the cathode ray tube that I took out. After I had become acquainted with the electrons, I started talking to them, and I became acquainted with, we're going to do this, and we're going to find out how to make things simpler for people to understand. And I'm stumbling here today, but I'll get with it here in a minute. So I asked the electron, I said, well, what can I do to aid this experiment and get it through without a lot of hassle? And it said, well, let me breathe. You were at work. Because of force, you don't give a chance for nature to breathe. To illustrate that, if you take 2 gallons of water and turn them upside down to empty them, they're full of water. And the conventional way is you just wait while it's trying to breathe. It's suffocating, trying to get the air to breathe. It will be emptying. And I've shown people in classes that before this gets almost done, over here I haven't touched this bottle until I spin it. And when you start a spin, you start a vortexial motion, which creates a vacuum. The vacuum is what we have called gravity. Gravity is not just a push or a pull, it is both. It is a push and a pull. And one side of this bottle, the pressure of the water weighing 8 pounds per gallon is pushing down, while the spiraling has created a vacuum, and the vacuum then pulls the water down through, and this jug is emptied before this one ever gets finished. Well, that's because you're allowing it to breathe. You're allowing the spaces to breathe. That's what we do. We go breathe in and we breathe out. And so that's the way I understood it from the electron. Give me a chance to breathe and I'll go through it for you. So I said, okay, I will. So I fired it up, and what I did was I gave it a millisecond or two pace. In firing the shot, instead of firing and forcing it, I pulsed the signal. I pulsed the shot before it went through. And it started to spiral, and it went through the magnetic field quite swiftly, quite fast, without deflection. It had no problem getting stuck either to the positive or negative side, because it's referred to as a yin and the yang. I think it's called yin and the yang. Yeah, mm-hmm. There's a duality in your in your sacred geometry, and in your, what do they call it, the Mobius twist, and the, what is that, the figure eight?
That's the Mobius twist.
Yeah, there's no beginning or end to that. And actually, you're going from one direction to another direction all the time, and that's, what's that? Yeah, thank you, that's the word I was looking for. I haven't had my coffee yet this morning, I think. Yeah, the infinity sign, it goes on forever, just like a ring. Well, it has to go one way and another. The energy that comes and goes through the planet is going in at the equator and coming out at the poles. It's going like this all the time. It's like a caduceus that's constantly moving. So anyway, long story short, because I got a lot to tell you, I used that technique and it worked. I took pictures of it and I wrote it up and took it into Dr. Weinhardt. He was the head of the institute. The institute was kinetic energy, and showed him what I'd done. And I said, well, I found a simpler way to do this. You can turn it over to the engineers, because I was just a lab tech. I said, but this is a simpler way of getting this electron through the field. He looked at it and saw it. He's a nuclear physicist. And he says, oh my God, Ralph, I see where you're going with this, but there's something you don't understand here. This is a government-funded research and development facility, and we're paid here to look for the answers, not to find them.
Oh my God.
Well, I said, well,
Oh my gosh.
I saw right then and there, there goes my job, because I can't work here anymore. And the same thing happened at the same time with levitation. The next bench over was working with levitation, and they were using iron cores to levitate steel balls, and they burned the iron cores up. In those days, they were called igliotrons, and they'd burn them up and have to go get another one checked out of supply. And they were burning them up, at like $10,000, $20,000 a day worth of waste. And I went home with the same speaker I used for the experiment of the electron, and I had an audio amplifier I picked up for $25 at a yard sale, put it on the speaker, and kept vibrating it until I found the ping pong ball would acoustically suspend in the center of the cone, and there was natural levitation. I wrote that one up and took pictures of that, and I took that one in at the same time, and he said, no, you can't go there, Ralph. So he told me to go back to work. He put more money in my envelope and so forth, but it was impossible, because I went back and I realized, what am I doing here if I can't make things easier by what I learned from nature for people to use? Then I'm wasting my time here. And I went out of the facility crying. I actually left my job crying. I couldn't believe that I was useless. I wasn't going to do any good for people if I couldn't use what I'd learned from nature. Well, on the way home, I ran into a friend of mine, a neighbor, and he belonged to a group called Understanding. It was created by a fellow by the name of Daniel Fry, and this was in Costa Mesa, California. And I told him what I had done, and that I wanted to eventually, see that we got off the ground, instead of seeing the tires running over the gardens and ruining the landscape, killing animals with tires. We take the wheel from a vertical position and turn it to a horizontal position. In other words, go back to the idea of levitation and get us into spaceships. And I said, and I did some research. The spaceships, there's nothing new. They've been here forever. In fact, we're the ones that are only just beginning to learn the value of getting things off the ground, because we're getting congested now where we're choking ourselves in traffic and so forth. So anyway, I said I wanted to create floating homes and floating cities, floating countries, and have all the things intact, because when you understand the laws of nature, everything is possible. There is no idea of impossible. There I go scratching my hand again. Yeah, that's one. She always reminds me, don't scratch your hand, you're getting nervous. So anyway, he said, come on over and talk to these guys, because these are people that want to see changes. They don't want to stay stagnant and stay the same way. So I went over and told them my story, and they in the interest of time, I'll speed things up here a little bit. They said there's a guy out in Oklahoma City named Otis Carr who had worked with Tesla. He worked for 3 years with Tesla, building spaceships, and he's having trouble because they're trying to shut him down. They have shut him down several times, and he put a patent in the patent office for levitation and teleportation. And the patent office turned him down. They said, you can't use those. You can't use the word resonance, you can't use the word levitation or teleportation in your patent. Take those out and we'll give you a patent on an amusement device, and you can set it up in a park and let kids ride on it and so forth. So he became discouraged because he knew the principles involved. Tesla had told him that spaceships have always been available, and the essence and what spaceships are is a matter. It's the same principle that I told you about the bottle. It's spinning things. Instead of trying to force things, you allow the laws of nature to work. When you start spinning that bottle, the laws of nature take over and help you. And everything that you do, if you turn it over to nature, you get all the aid that you want. You never have to worry again about trying to do it yourself. And the way you do that is stop thinking. And the way you do that is, honey, can you help me here?
When he says stop thinking, he doesn't mean stop learning or understanding. Actually, if we stop using the intellect and start opening up to the oneness, we've all heard of the Akashic records, or there's a one universal mind that we can draw anything, any idea of any sort out of when we need it. So we talk about we don't think anymore. We just allow it to come through when it's time. When we need something, we allow that learning or that thought, that idea to come to us.
I'll make it easier by using metaphors and try to explain it in ways. Metaphors are just another way of presenting a picture that you can see, not hearing my words, but you can picture it in your mind. We live in a duality system of right and wrong and good and bad and so forth. And we eventually arrive at a place where we're thinking too much, because we have belief systems in science, we have them in religion, we have them in the medical field, and as soon as you believe something and you say this is it, somebody else with another belief system will come along and change that, and we're in a constant flux of doing the same thing over and over and over again because of a belief system. And I equate that to a knowing system. That's the difference, is a knowing system. And I metaphorically will explain that to you by nobody can tell me I'm not hungry. Nobody can tell me I don't have to use the restroom. I mean, those are a knowing, and that's when you're using your feelings to guide you, not your thoughts. And the belief system says, well, you can't do this or you can do that. You have to get into your own knowing system. Yes, I can, because I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. Or yes, I'm sleepy, I'm going to sleep. Because that's you talking to you, not listening to somebody else, not external information, internal information. So you get to the point of starting to know things about yourself, and the way you do things is, I'm not going to do it till I feel it. Well, that's a good thing, because you're then entering the field of knowing, and you get so that you move along in that field long enough. It's like driving a car. When you first are introduced to the idea of driving a car, you're scared to death. Like, I'm not sure, I'm not. And it's the same with the belief system, and some people will tell you you can, and some people say you can't. But you courageously start driving a car, and then you know that you can drive a car. But then the next step on the evolutionary scale of learning, if you will, or actually it's remembering. The learning is obsolete now. There's no more learning to be made. It's just remembering who you are, and I'll get into that. But
I just want to share an experience that I had in this last November, December, talking about not being able to drive a car after you've driven for years and years. And I was in a position where fear took over, and I could not drive a car. And I'm thinking that's one thing that we need to release and look at, is the fears that come into our lives. I have never been a fearful person, but I did. I had a spell where I couldn't see. I would have blackouts. And so I got into that fear place. It lasted about 2 weeks. And I did every kind of process that I've studied with all of the metaphysical things, all of the spiritual things, and it did leave. But I'm feeling that those fears or those programs are in us and have been inbred in us. And if they come up, there's always a way to let them go.
well, when you accept the idea that you're an infinite being and nothing is impossible, then you courageously learn how to drive a car, and then you know you can drive a car, and then you get to a point where you know that you know. That point is you don't have to think about driving a car anymore.
That's
You
true.
get in and do it. It's all going naturally, flowing naturally to you. So you no longer have to think. So you've elevated your consciousness to a space of not just knowing, but knowing that you know, and you commit it to nature, and you keep climbing, and in a scale that goes from the belief system to the knowing system to the knowing that you know system, and then the final stage where Marcia and I are located now is you know nothing. And that's the state you want to get to, is know nothing. Because when you know nothing, you have infinite trust or faith that you will, when you need to know it, it will be there. And it always will be there. And we can testify to that because we've been living that way for years now. Everywhere we go, we're living by the laws of grace, which means don't think, just know. Don't know planning. We intend on going places or doing things, and we have ideas that we kick around, but all of a sudden we just find ourselves here or there or different places. So it's a place of knowing nothing and allowing the universe to come through you, because the known.
The I am that's within us, guiding us in every single thing that we do, that every place that we go. And if it's not that divine guidance, we know it. We know it right away.